We assess Putin feels aggrieved the West does not give him proper deference and perceives this as a war he cannot afford to lose.
The top intelligence officials in America now testifying before Congress about exactly how this war is going for Vladimir Putin. It is way, way behind schedule. They said that Vladimir Putin thought that in the first 48 hours he was going to be able to move his convoy here and then also down south and take Kyiv. So far, they have not been able to. In the past 24 hours, though, Russian forces have made some serious headway, especially over here, breaking out in the south, out of Crimea this way and out here. This is the area to watch in the east. Remember, the Russians have claimed the east for a long time, since the 2014 war. And that's why the Ukrainians had dug in a line of forces about like this. Some of their very best forces are in the eastern part of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and the Russian army have pinned them down with a frontal attack here coming out of Russia and is now trying to encircle that Ukrainian force and cut them off. Once they do, it will sadly, and we know this about Russian tactics, be a slaughter of Ukrainian troops in the eastern part of Ukraine. One of the reasons the Ukrainians are fighting so hard down here in the south is to keep that kind of slaughter from happening in Odessa, one of their largest cities, a key port city. This is video of Ukrainian troops shooting at a Russian tank with a Javelin missile. These are missiles that have been provided by the United States, and this is what's stopping the Russians from moving across. We've also talked a lot about the amphibious forces here in the Black Sea. They're waiting for this force to meet up, and then they move on Odessa. This is clearly way behind schedule as well. Shelling, and that's the other thing that Vladimir Putin is doing now that he is desperate, indiscriminately shelling the civilian areas outside of Kyiv. He doesn't have enough troops to hold civilian areas, the suburbs, so he's trying to beat them into submission. This is video out of Irpin, just northwest of Kyiv, and we are seeing the firefighters trying to put out massive fires at fuel depots. This one is a little bit farther south in Ukraine. Either way, it shows you what the Russians are doing, most importantly, because they are trying to break the Ukrainians' ability to have fuel in any of their vehicles that are going to try and fight here, or hold Kharkiv. We're still watching, obviously, for the amphibious assault down here. Robert Sherman and our crew back here in Lviv, which is the final stand. The Ukrainians are still asking for a NATO no-fly zone. They didn't get the MiG fighter jets from the polls they had hoped for. There's a letter that just went out by 27 of America's top foreign policy minds or experts on Ukraine, including the former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, also the U.S. Army Europe former commander William Taylor, former ambassador to Ukraine, among others, all endorsing the idea of a no-fly zone. With that, we bring in Stephen Blank, one of the signers of the letter. Start here with you, sir. Am I to understand that you think that it's worth putting U.S. fighter jets over Ukraine to stop Russian fighter jets?
Yes, I think it's worth putting in NATO, not just U.S., NATO fighter jets in Ukraine under a UN resolution to impose a no-fly zone in Ukraine. I would not just...
Due respect, sir. We know we're not going to get a UN Security Council resolution. The Russians and the Chinese both have veto power.
I'm talking about the UN General Assembly. The General Assembly has the power to do it, and China and Russia could not stop it if they decided to do so.
All right. One of the other signers of the letter, General Breedlove, former Supreme Allied Commander, had this to say. Take a listen.
It is an act of war. You will shoot down those that come in, and you have to take down the ground forces that are firing at you in the zone. But a humanitarian no-fly zone can be written with different rules of engagement, ROE, such that we can be much less belligerent. It's not perfect.
How does your proposal end in something other than a war between the United States and Russia, or NATO and Russia?
Well, first of all, as a co-signer, General Breedlove and I, as well as the other signers, are arguing for a humanitarian effort, not a combat effort. That puts the onus of combat on the Russians, not on the United States. So I think it's morally and strategically justified to do so, because what we are seeing in Ukraine, as your report has shown, is war crimes, pure and simple, atrocity.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to figure out how it is that you ask American and NATO fighter pilots to fly into Ukraine and wait to be shot at by the Russians, because you know Vladimir Putin is going to challenge a no-fly zone, and what's the point of putting one in place if you're not going to enforce it?
I don't know that Mr. Putin's going to challenge.
Is it worth the risk?
I think it is, because I don't think that Mr. Putin knows himself if he's going to challenge American forces directly. As Assistant Secretary of State Nuland said, we know that he is wary of escalating to attack the United States. The intelligence directors who spoke today at the congressional hearing you aired said that he's wary of attacking the United States. I want to change his decision calculus so that he doesn't think he can count on the West not responding, and that he can continue to make intimidating threats against NATO, which is much stronger than Russia, and proceed on that basis.
Well, you make a great point in that the United States has consistently said what we're not willing to do and very little about what we are willing to do. Past no-fly zones, Iraq, 91 to 2003. That didn't really stop Saddam much ways. Bosnia-Herzegovina, 93 to 95. The one I was involved in, I was there in Libya in 2011 when NATO no-fly zone turned into close air support for the rebels. I was with the rebels, and boy, there's a lot of people who'd say you wish you had Gaddafi back in Libya right now, considering what it's turned into.
Well, Libya has turned into a civil war that's gone on for a decade, but we're not talking about Libya. We're talking about Ukraine. And in Ukraine, if you draw up your rules of engagement, as General Breedlove said, and you adhere to them, and you have UN backing for NATO to go in there, I'm not sure that Mr. Putin would be so fast on the trigger.
Well, but again, though, if you're wrong, sir, though, hold on. If you're wrong, and whatever the rules of engagement are, if U.S. fighter planes are shot at, they have to have the right to defend themselves. They splash and shoot down a couple of Russian fighters. How do you not end up in a full force-on-force NATO versus Russia war? You're betting that Putin is going to back down?
I think that he wouldn't challenge the no-fly zone because he doesn't want to challenge NATO. I think his game is trying to intimidate people so he can have a free hand and dominate the escalation ladder. I want to take away that dominance, because then you have attacked his strategy, not his forces. And then you put the onus of responding on him. Rather than have the United States and NATO and everybody else react to Putin's decisions, I want to put him in a situation where he has to react to our strategic initiative.
Well, Mr. Blank, it is a brave and noble cause, because certainly, as you point out, what Vladimir Putin has been doing in Ukraine is horrific. I mean, we have not seen tactics like that since the last time Vladimir Putin did it in Chechnya, but your point is well made, or in Syria. Stephen Blank, we appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you, and great points. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.